Hey everybody, Jerome B.F.A.M cooking. You know this is another cooking episode. So today we're going to do something I'm considering myself to, enjoy very thoroughly. That would happen to be creamy mushroom soup. Now I'm going to be sort of using the recipe, sort of not. So I'm going to call it inspired by this, follow along sort of by the book. I guess it's basically making my own recipe, but I'm taking my inspiration from our friends there at Test Kitchen. So, my best memory from Santa Fe was one of our major last dinners. We went to a very, very nice restaurant called Geronimo's. It was in the artist little area, up galleries up and down the street. Sort of a kitschy thing. You pull up and they got somebody to valet your parking because they don't have enough parking. Yada yada yada. But they brought out a mushroom soup. I think it was a wild mushroom and avocado soup. You should be seeing photos of it soon, right? Very, extremely delicious. I could have had a larger bowl than this. But with this particular mushroom soup, I wanted that recipe like nobody's business. They said they were going to send it. I haven't received it yet, and it's been months. So I started looking for my own recipe. This is how I looked in the book that I already owned, right, to the America's Test Kitchen. And I was like, but this doesn't quite seem like it has enough mushrooms in it. So I came up with this recipe where I'm using 3 kinds of mushrooms. I'm using portobello mushrooms, baby shiitake mushrooms. I'm using dried mushrooms, the wild dried mushrooms, of which you already seen that I've blended down and made into a powder so that I can dust the mushrooms. That's right, mushrooms on top of mushrooms to make this mushroom soup. I think it'll allow you to have it definitely added to the flavor because you would add that same dust of mushroom in the soup itself, in the broth itself, and cook that down. So it's sort of like when you create a smoothie, you're trying to intensify and give flavors that are multi-layered. So with this type of mushroom, and then of course, obviously we want to end with a mushroom. So this is the process of building flavor. Mushroom on top of mushroom on top of mushroom. Generally, mushrooms are pretty dirty. So you want to wash them somehow, not with water. You want to wash them, brush them with a rag, a clean rag, obviously, or a brush. You can use that. Those are all good to do that. I generally also like to cut off the bottoms, definitely off the stems, but I use the stems in my cooking. So we're going to chop this stuff up and get it into a pan. What we're trying to do is get a roasted mushrooms, but we have to add that roastedness with the butter that we'll be using and the salt to release all of the water. So it just we don't need that water. We need flavor, and that requires a little bit of salt and a lot of mushrooms. So on top of the wild mushrooms, we're going to use shiitake, portobello, and button mushrooms all together with the wild mushrooms. This is going to give us what a unique flavor. I can't wait for you to try this. You need butter in the pan because I think brown butter and mushrooms with time, there is no comparison to a good start of any mushroom dish. Mushrooms, time. You got to have those things together. So let's get that butter browning in a pan. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to fry the mushrooms. That means we want to create a color on them. We need to see them not only be mushroomy color, we want to see them cooked with a little bit of a sear. You're going to need your thyme. You're going to need some salt, some large sea salt, And you're gonna need a little bit of, you can throw a little pepper in there. Always season as you go. This is the part that it can be complicated for some people, but as you can see the water reducing here, you'll see the mushrooms just shrink and they start to wilt. And then it's time. Notice I'm not moving it, then we're moving it. See the color? That's what I want you to have in your pan. Now it's time to get that dust out. Yes, mushroom dust. Mushrooms on top of mushrooms. And we're going to cook that into the mushrooms. So that's your wild mushrooms cooked on top of the mushroom. Do not use all of your mushroom dust to cook the mushrooms. You can, but don't. I prefer to use some of it with the chicken stock. The chicken stock is coming later, or the beef stock, whichever you prefer to use. That's a different way of getting it involved. You want to make a mushroom broth, and you want to have mushrooms that you're incorporating, all of which is getting blended in the blender at the end. I had to not crowd the pan, just like everyone else shouldn't, doing mushroom after mushroom until you cook them all. So that took me 2 rounds. And then next up, we went into the onions. Need at least 1 whole onion. For flavor, baby, for flavor. So here we have the onions in butter, rendered down butter. We're going to toast that just like we just did the onions, except for this time we're just adding the mushrooms and some salt, and that's it. Cooking it down, making sure that it has a little bit of color, not burnt, just fried. A little bit of brown. So next up, we're going to take the onions and move those together with the mushrooms and sort them on the side as we get our base pan started. Now, you could have done this all in this one pan. You could have fried the mushrooms, fried the onions, and just kept using the same pan. I used a frying pan because I wanted you guys to see it better. All right. So here we have a bunch of garlic that we just grated in there, and a bunch of butter. To get us started. Now, we obviously don't want to burn the garlic. Just do it nice and quickly. And once it comes up to temp, we're going to add in our mushrooms and onions to get the base of this mushroom soup, creamy mushroom soup, ready for you to eat. Now is the time to use all of that perfect powdered wild mushrooms that you made before. We're going to add in a bunch of it, and then we'll add the rest into our stock, which we'll be adding into this mixture. Now, this is basically 2 quarts of beef stock that you could use, is what I used in this particular recipe with all of those ground mushrooms. It's going to be one of the best soups that I think you've had. We're going to add in some sherry, a little bit of maybe soy sauce, a couple of tablespoons. Check the recipe. I definitely have it all written down, but it's all together in the liquids. I'm going to bring this thing up to temperature, which is boiling. So first we're going to add the sherry and the dark soy sauce in the other container, and then add that in to the soup so that it can all cook down together. It looks like a hot mess, but man, does it smell really, really great. Really, really great. Mushroomy, nutty, It just needs a little bit. It's gonna look like a hot mess, like a pot of dirt. But I know that doesn't sound attractive, but this soup will blend down and be smooth, but you got to cook it and cook it and cook it until it gets down to that dark color. And then you're going to add in that cream that's going to bring it back to a color that may be a little more palatable for everyone. Combining tomato powder and tomato paste brings that level of tomato goodness to your soup. I know you don't want tomatoes in your mushroom soup. It's just something that adds a little bit of in it. And this is the way you get it. It's going to be about 3 tablespoons of tomato powder plus about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Creamy 4 mushroom soup requires some work, as you can see, but it's going to come out perfect. The problem is that we have to make sure that we get all those flavors. We've got 4 different types of mushrooms. We have tomato powder. We have our sherry in there to give you that little bit of vinegary sort of flavor later, and sweet goodness. And then you have that sour coming from the soy, and a little bit of salt. So obviously I'm not saying add salt here. You will need to taste. We're going to blend a lot after this. In this case, it's going into the Vitamix, so you know it's going to do its job. After 30 minutes, it's been reduced. It's time to taste. We're going to check our levels, add some black pepper, see if there's anything else that it needs, maybe a little sugar, maybe a little salt, I don't know. Whichever way it is, we're going to check. And in this case, I just went with the black pepper. Your soup is basically done. Just needs to be blended. So for garnish of this dish, you're going to need a little more mushrooms, a little butter, salt, mushrooms, simple. We're going to stack those in the middle. If I remember correctly, at the place in Geronimo, he mixed mushrooms and asparagus. Your choice. After blending, you're going to return it to the pan and add a little bit of cream to your liking. Some people want it a little thin, some people want it a little thick. So I would suggest that you go and try it to your liking. Right. The last little piece that I would add is a little bit of lemon zest, just to add a little bit of brightness. It's always important to add a little bit of brightness along with all of the other flavors you have going on, the tomato and the soy sauce and just the sherry. A little bit of brightness just throws it over the top. Can't wait for you to try this. Creamy 4 mushroom soup. All right, time to get it on the plate. We got garnish. We're going to put the stacks of fried mushrooms. That would be chives in the container and the crispy onions. So now you have your soft, your meaty, and of course your green. And I'm going to finish it with a little bit of more heavy cream. And I'm going to add in a little bit of wild mushroom olive oil, just drips of it. It's going to make a perfect presentation. Enjoy.